Hi everyone, welcome to Conversations with Rajeshwari Kalyanam. I'm here with a great Indian artist, a sculptor, and he has paved the way for what we call today the modern contemporary Indian sculpture. Sir, welcome to my interview.
Yes,
And yes, I think your sculptures have the reason. One of the reasons I would think is that we are always attracted to them, and they are so captivating. Is that there's a lot of story going on there, and there's a lot of connect to the to us. Indian, since I'm an Indian, I would say Indian, or human beings for that matter. There are a lot of human figures, and there's a lot of story going on there, and there's some kind of activity. They are so alive in their forms, and you use bronze. So we'll talk about all that. So to begin with, you were talking about we were just talking about the way we have you have imbibed the whole process of coming to a sculpture. And you would always talk about the whole process, which is more important than the end product, which probably leads to the end sculpture or the art. So can you please explain your method?
Well, I took to sculpting when I went to Shantiniketan as a student. In fact, I went initially with the idea of becoming a painter, but later I met with great masters like Ram Kinger Bej and also Sharbari Roy Chaudhary. Those two sculptors were living in the campus of Shantiniketan, and their sculptures were extremely inspiring. And I took to the idea of taking clay and start working on those. But from the very beginning itself, I have noticed that any forms that I was trying to do, it was meant to be evoking a lot of movement, and and also the idea of working with human figures that was started in the beginning itself. So I would really claim myself to be, working with people, in the sense that the people, their movement, their directions, it really sort of getting into, single figures, sometimes very massive, evoking movement from within, and also sort of creating complex compositions, making them together in a larger group, which also gives a kind of a movement of ascending and the descending. So it's really sort of a great or much to really look back in terms of the whole evolving nature of my work, from things that were very enclosed introvert to a kind of an extended figurative extrovert movements and things like that, and then from the very intimate to the impersonal and larger open air sculptures. So a lot of things has been happening for the last 40 years. So 4 decades I've been working on these sculptures and sculptures of the people, and are meant for, sort of sometimes some of the large sculptures are done for the purpose of keeping them in outside, and the open air which really found spaces in all over the world, in the sense that
absolutely.
In south of France itself I have done some 32 sculptures in the open air itself.
Wow, wonderful.
So it has been an interesting space that I have been going through, and looking for more and more spaces to come in my way.
So you are here at Kara, and I've seen your work, which probably you might have done, and you've donated it to the cause of. They're donating it for children who are hearing impaired. That's a beautiful cause here. Now I see this sculpture. It may not be large in the scale of it, but the whole feel you get out of looking at it gives you the space. It's so free. It's so evolving in its own. So also when we talk about Indian ethos in sculptures and or art for that matter, and when we say you're an Indian modern artist, what do you think is a major thing? You consciously kind of introduced it, or has it happened to you? And what is this major thing that brings Indianness to your work?
You see, as a sculptor or for any other artist, I would really say adopting a kind of an intention is something else. But the way you are being an Indian, instead of going after Indianness, I think if I am sincerely working on the kind of sculptures of the art expressions, the Indianness is becoming an integral part of your exercise. You don't have to go after it because it's there. it's not a forced,
Yes.
it doesn't make a forced entry into the whole nature of your work.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and so I really would say that since it is people, and then the relevance naturally becomes stronger in a global context also.
Yes, it
So
does.
wherever the work is installed, whichever part of the world will make its presence stronger. And in nature of the kind of subjects that I choose, and the kind of material that I handle, and all that sort of together, I would really say that a kind of a contemporary Indian complexity that naturally gets into my compositions, which is because I really don't have to bring in, and the kind of work itself reflects that, and I strongly embrace that idea that comes into my sculptures.
And evidently, you also have been trained at Shantiniketan, which is like the
That's
hub
right.
of Indian art, and then of course come from Kerala, which
Yeah,
is
yes.
in its own way has been a major place from where a lot of great
Very
artists
true.
have come. And also, when you talk about medium, what has drawn you to bronze, and what has been the process like?
Yeah. The kind of sculptures that I do, and the kind of positioning of the figures sometimes that I do are very airbound, and that airboundness evoking a lot of lightness.
Yes.
And that with a minimum contact on the ground and spreading or stretching the rest of the human body in space, that can only be achieved with a very strong medium like bronze. Because no other medium can give you that strength where you can throw out in space. So I suppose one is that because of I know the whole technology of working with bronze, I choose the kind of subjects of this nature, and where I create movements in space. But maybe it also happens the other way
Other way
also,
around,
that
yes.
that I make such kind of a figures knowing that bronze is the only thing that can support that kind of a movement. So it really works together, because which comes first you don't know. But I don't think that the kind of work that I'm doing can find any other alternative medium other than bronze. And even the work that I have given here for Kara Festival, which has a container, and that container is also made of bronze, and itself is embossed with some tiny figures. But even these tiny figures are all put together, almost like sort of emerging out of the vessel, and then a kind of a spiral structure that is in space, getting into an ascending and dissolving in space. Now, what happens is that all these figures are separately bronze casted, and then I put them together by welding the sculptures.
Yes.
So by welding, you really don't have it's almost like very instinctive, very intuitive an approach that I take with the kind of figures that are put together.
Yeah.
So I would really say it is a kind of a state of mind.
Yes. It also doesn't have
Yes.
a beginning and an end.
Yes.
It's like a continuous
process.
yes.
Yeah. So I think the way the state of mind, you really make a kind of a movement in space.
Wonderful, sir. So, can we also talk about the inspirations? I've also heard talk about your inspiration, which of the bald figurines that go back to a boy that you met. I wouldn't know the story
Yes.
completely, but maybe a little bit of that story, plus maybe a few other inspirations through your journey.
Yes. See, I think it was in 1976 or maybe beginning of the 77 when I was a student in Shantiniketan, the Kalabhavan. And Shantiniketan, when you say it's Vishwabharati, it's a university, and that doesn't have a kind of a periphery, strong periphery as such. It gets merged into the villages, to the canals, to the paddy fields and everything like that. It's nature coming into the university, and university also sort of get extended into the natural environment. So, I remember that, this was happened when I was sort of coming from one of the roads in Shantiniketan, where by the side of the road, I met with one guy who was standing and smiling, and with the very smile itself, and he was asking for bread basically. And then when normally people ask for something, any kind of a help. They make all kind of pathetic expression on their face, but instead he was very different because he was having a great smile on his face. And then I asked him, well, to get you something, why don't you come to my studio? So he comes to my studio, and I did a portrait of him.
Okay.
And that portrait was named because of he had the name called Musui, M-U-S-U-I.
That's not that's an Indian name.
Yeah, it was a Santal tribal's name. Because Vishavardhi has many Santal villages nearby or surrounded, and he was like one of the Santal boy who must have been, of the same age like mine when I met him.
Oh, yeah. I thought when you said a small boy, I was imagining a small.
No, not really. He was also in his early 20s, and then I really could connect to that smile with the person with him, and he really was standing as a model for me to start with a portrait and later entire the human figure. Of Musui was sculpted, and that sculpture has become a kind of a an expression permanently sort of fixed for most series of my sculptures. So while working on Musui, I found the necessity of the counterpart to make the narrative stronger and continuous, and where the Maya has come into existence.
Yes.
So Maya means it's just the girl,
the feminine,
the feminine side of Musui. So Musui Maya has been a kind of a permanently
such
appeared, beautiful kind of a togetherness.
Yes.
So I always say that Maya is the half of Musui, and Musui is the half of Maya. So these two halves together integrated into one being, and the story continues.
Wonderful. So through the years, of course, you would need as an artist a lot of other inspirations to go on. And so has there been anything significant that you kind of think this has been the beginning, or maybe of form making the form which has stayed with all your sculpture till today? Yeah. So, but is there any other significant inspiration or a person through your course of journey who you think has influenced majorly in your work in terms of
Yes, I understand. You see, well, as a student at the university, I was very close to these two masters, Ramkinkar Beja and Sharbiri Roy Chaudhary. And Ramkinkar took to the idea of doing large humans, bigger than life sculptures, or the monumental sculptures in the medium of concrete. And Sharbiri Roy Chaudhary was working on something which is very intimate and small scale sculptures. So both of them, their sensibilities were very different, but yet they were totally human. These people, both peer personalities made such a strong impact on me to continue my taking up the ideas and things like that. But then I also learned making my own experiment, and to really get a kind of a direction totally independent to whoever people that I have got the inspiration from, to make an independent space for oneself. And I would really say one of the first thing that a major Musui work, a major sculpture with Musui was happened in 1996 when ITC company asked me to do a large sculpture where the Musui becomes the rickshaw puller. And on that rickshaw, I was thinking who would be sitting on that. So probably I think whether I made it or not, I was sitting on the rickshaw where Musui was pulling and taking me to a kind of a much larger space. So I feel I'm still, Musui is not struggling to pull me along, or I'm not finding. So sometimes we shift. I make Musui sit on the rickshaw and I take him along.
That way all your works more or less have been a little biographical in that sense?
I suppose in most cases that there has to be some sort of a link. And that is what a writer or a filmmaker or a sculptor or whatever medium that you work, you would definitely put yourself in the right context, visible, invisible. Maybe it is there, knowingly or unknowingly, and that's what, like when you ask me about the intentness, probably that's also one of the source for yourself is very much there as a part of the sculpture.
So we are with Mr. KS Radhakrishnan, the eminent sculptor from India. We'll be back in the next part.